screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. Hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet. Eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome back to Rogue Ways, where tonight we're going to talk about the GATE program. That's the Gifted and Talented Education Program. And all of its nefarious possible contextualizations, connections, and effects. And we'll just see. We'll see where we go. It seems like it's very possible there were some dark things going on with the GATE programs, as far back as maybe the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then why has it disappeared in the modern era, we wonder. We'll get into all of this and more tonight on Rogue Ways. Thank you for being here and being you. As always, this is your own analog electric concentric dose of wisdom. And yes, I was a GATE kid. I just didn't know it. I didn't know it really. I knew I was in special programs. No one ever called it the GATE program to my face. And if they did, I don't remember that. So it's actually interesting. I was on, Quite Frankly, it's a fantastic show. If somehow you've never heard of it, then you're missing out. Frank's an awesome guy, and it's always nice to hang out with him. In fact, we'll be doing a book club together this August. So just about a month from now, we're going to be doing, you guessed it, The Neverending Story. Woo! So if you are a subscriber, a supporter of Frank's, then you'll get access to our in-depth Neverending Story talk. I have to say, I've never done the Neverending Story fully and in-depth, even on my own show, even though it is like one of the deepest underpinnings of my entire life. Favorite book, favorite movie, always has been, never has changed. So for many, many reasons. So if you've always wanted to hear exactly why I love the Neverending Story so much, that might be a fantastic opportunity for you. He does end up releasing them, I think, a couple months after the fact. But in the meantime, like if you want to get in on it, you got to be a supporter, Quite Frankly. So go check that out and how to support him. And then you'll be ready when the time comes. But back on his show, I don't know, maybe sometime last year, he asked me, were you in the GATE program? And I was like, I don't know what that is. And he's like, oh, it's the Gifted and Talented something education. And I said, well, I was in Odyssey of the Mind. And that's what I could remember at the moment. I was sort of on the spot. It's all that came to mind. It is actually what I remember better and with more clarity than what the actual GATE program was. If you guys knew of Odyssey of the Mind, there were some aspects where it was connected with school, but there was a lot of it that was out of school. It was extracurricular, actually. And so I had to at least go to meetings and go to all of the events outside of school. We had to have adults who would sponsor us in order to do these things. It was super fun, and it was very challenging, very highly motivating problems that we were supposed to solve. And one of them, we were supposed to create a vehicle without using very specific types of like motors or wheels. And we were supposed to create something that would move anyway. And so we, got really clever and put together some things. Another one was that we had to figure out how to help salmon and rivers. And so it was good for me because I was a very gifted kid, and having, projects and problems that actually challenged me was rare, very rare. I was reading at a college level by third grade. So I was doing math. I could have been in very high grades beyond my age, but I was a very sensitive kid. And so I don't think they thought that would be very good for me to be in that sort of environment. But I didn't remember when Quite Frankly was asking me. And I did remember later when he was randomly actually had Sam Tripoli, good friend, been on the show. I've been on his show many times as well. They had him on, and I just happened to tune in for a moment, and they just happened to be talking about the GATE program, and it like came back to me. I was like, oh yeah, I was in a weird pull you out of the normal school day, go into another room with just a few other kids in your grade and do other things. But the weirdest part was that I hadn't remembered when he asked me the first time. No one else had ever asked me. I hadn't thought about it in years. And I did remember at that moment, but I still couldn't remember the details. Odyssey of the Mind was like 2 years later, as far as I can remember, and I remember that better. The other weird thing about my memory being weird about this is that I remember everything else from that year very, I mean, not like more vividly than any other year, but like it's not like my memory is poor around that time. I just don't have the greatest memories of this actual program. What I do remember is that the kids who were in the program with me made sense. Like when I look back, I'm like, yep, those were the other high IQ children for sure. Obviously so. So that makes sense to me when I look at who was in that program with me. And the only thing I can really remember is that it felt like a very large and empty room because there was only like 5 of us in there. I was a very small school too, so I don't know if bigger schools would have lots more kids in the room in these GATE programs. But in my school, there was like 5 of us. And so I remember it feeling really empty. I remember feeling very, I don't know, unsure or like protective. So who knows what those memories or feelings are connected to. Maybe just because it was different and weird, maybe because there was actually a reason that I have that memory of that feeling. And the other thing I remember is being tested. I remember testing, and I remember being very intently watched. And my feeling about the people who were watching us is that they were not our regular teachers. So I don't know who those people are. And I would love to remember more than that. I mean, I was 10, 11, so I should remember more than that, but that's what I remember. The other interesting thing, it's not, I don't think, well, who knows if it's connected with the GATE program or not, but a lot of those kids, we all went through quite troubled times. I already had been going through troubled times. I don't think a lot of those other kids had as much trouble that early as I did. But they all ended up sort of like, I don't know, flying off the tracks in some way or another. At the same time, I'll say that actually tends to happen with a lot of high IQ kids because you don't actually get enough stimulation. The world, you see through it pretty quickly. It therefore becomes sort of depressing. You see that most adults aren't as smart as you. They might have technically more knowledge in a lot of areas, but they're not smart. And they can't answer most of your questions. So there's a lot of like loneliness. There's a lot of hopelessness that can sink in with high intelligence kids. And so a lot of them do end up doing a bunch of drugs. They're super bored and they're super disappointed in life, as you should be anyway. But so those are all interesting thoughts just to get us started. But we're going to look in today to some documents, to some ideas, to some conspiracy theories, to some hypotheses about what's going on with this GATE program. When I was hearing it, I was hearing people say Gates program. And so I was thinking this was something to do with the Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates' foundation. And no, it's not. So that's just the way people say it, I guess. But it is actually GATE program. And so let's look at, was this a predatory program? Was there some other nefarious things going on? We'll do our best to get into it today. And so let's just get started. All right. If you would like to connect with me deeper, you can come and get my books here on rogueways.org. You can sign up for and book yourself for any of the soul services I offer with tarot, spiritual guidance sessions, sound healing, and more. You can check out the dream walking. We actually already started this most recent one. So the next one might be as late as October. If I get a lot of people who are interested before then, I might try to get another group going before then. But otherwise, October is probably the next chance for dream walking. We're going to actually look a little closer at some of the results of dream walking tonight because my dream walking group, which is so awesome, you know who you are, chose to do some it's almost like remote viewing into the GATE program. We got some really spicy things out of that. So we'll actually look further into some dream walking results tonight. And if you want to become a dream walker, absolutely anyone can do it. And I would love to teach you how. You can come join me in October. So you can schedule sessions here, get the books here, check out the dream walking here. You can look at the testimony of the people who've worked with me over the years. You can check out what's in the shop. There's lots of Orgone, beautiful Orgone Lotus votive, super powerful. I also make exceptionally powerful Orgone pillars. If you want to order a custom pillar for yourself, those are amazing. And all of that is here at rogueways.org. I'll also invite you to rogueways.substack.com, where I channel through messages from the spiritual ancestors, my spiritual allies and guides. And the most recent is the Immutable Truth in Expression. If you're a paid subscriber, you get access to all of those channel messages as they come through. If you're a free subscriber, you get previews of those, and you get articles like Cycles of Wellness here. And mostly it's health and wellness stuff for the free subscribers, but you also get to stay in touch and keep updated. For example, when One Day of Brightness comes around, or other specific offers like that are sometimes on here. So it's just good to be in touch here. If you want to come be a free subscriber or a paid subscriber, go to rogueways.substack.com. Alrighty. So I really like archive.org. I have for I don't know, since 2003. I'm not sure, but it's always been a fantastic resource that has never seemed to change. They've always fought to keep this access for everybody. It's like an online internet library, actually, much, much less tampered with than Wikipedia and the like. So this is also the home of the Wayback Machine, which you've probably seen most often if you've seen anything from this site. So I just like to give them a shout out every time. And I do a lot of my research here. They have a lot of documents that are just easy to find and access here without all the shenanigans of Google and other poor search engines. I actually use Presearch as my search engine, and it's a bit better, but archive.org still trumps them all. So if you like it, you like it. If you know, you know. And if you don't know, now you know. So I searched for the GATE program, and I just wanted to show you, if you can see any of these results, 100% of them. Well, I searched for GATE program /CIA, right? I wanted to see how the CIA had its fingers dabbling in here. And I just want to show you that 100% of the results are CIA documents, CIA FOI, Freedom of Information Act releases. They're all about the Stargate program. So unfortunately, that's 2 words, and the GATE part shows up. And you can use Boolean searches here. So you could say -*, and when you do that, you get nothing about the GATE program. So there's no official documents I have found that link the CIA to the GATE program, the Gifted and Talented program. But I guarantee you there are still ways to find this. I just can't find them in a day getting ready for a show. But I bet you there's other words. Like, I don't think they're using the acronym GATE, the Gifted and Talented Education acronym. So whatever they are using, I haven't discovered it, and maybe someone else has, and that's great. I would love to see any CIA or official government documents, rather, that have anything to do with whether they use the GATE program for recruitment or otherwise. To keep tabs on people, just to measure certain maybe psychokinetic effects, or who knows what, but couldn't find it here. So moving on, we do have just official documents of various school districts around the country from various years, from various decades, that are just about the GATE program in their district. And none of these are juicy. Like, they're all exactly what you would expect an educational pamphlet or document to be. It's like a bunch of, we're gonna do this. Here's what we aim to do. Here's we're gonna know if we did it. It's like your standard, like corporatized, just like sort of overworked. Could have been said in 6 bullet points, but instead we made a 24-page document like that. There's some legislative background to it. So like most of this is about the funding that the government was giving to promote gifted and talented education support. And that's really all there is to it. It's pretty boring. It's pretty lame. You can see here, like, one of the only handy documents, visuals that they have is just showing you all the different ways you can support gifted kids, and that it can work no matter what your program is like. So, you can do some part-time grouping, you can do enrichment activities, you can do independent study and accelerated learning. Even within your normal classroom, you don't have to do pull-out programs, et cetera, et cetera. Like, only teachers would really care about this document. It's super dry and boring. I do remember, by the way, that aside from being pulled out, I had a lot of this independent study and accelerated learning where I would just sit in the corner of the classroom and do my own stuff at much higher levels uh, because I didn't want to be away from my friends. And again, they didn't really want to put me at higher levels because they didn't think it was great for me to do so. So a lot of these things they're talking about here is I did that too. I mean, and a lot of people did. You might look back and go like, "Oh yeah, I had some of that." Like I was doing math over in the corner with a couple other kids at like higher levels. So it's pretty normal stuff, really. And so part of why I'm just showing this is to show you that in general, gifted and talented programs aren't like nefarious at all, right? No more than the government indoctrination centers are already intrinsically nefarious, right? Like they're already killing your leadership, killing your free will, killing your creativity, killing your love of learning most of the time in most places since their inception. So that's all true. But beyond that, there's no especially nefarious aspects of this. Not on the surface, not intentionally, not by school districts, not at this level. Um, and so there's also a lot of criticism of gifted programs. And the way that we have been doing it most recently, my entire teaching career, the way we were doing gifted education was to just differentiate within the classroom. You would still give the student like almost the exact same assignment. You wouldn't put them off in a corner by themselves or even with a small group of kids. You would just give them the same assignment, but more difficult, more challenging, more robust. And you would just expect a higher outcome from them and you would grade them accordingly. And it wasn't a big deal. Like this was actually the easiest way to do it as a teacher. And it's also the best seemingly psychologically for the child because then they're not made fun of for being smart or different or full of themselves or any of this sort of stuff that can happen like the bullying. I never got bullied, mostly because I didn't care. I was like, why would I care if you think being smart is stupid? Like, I'm going to go catch grasshoppers. See you later. It wasn't a big deal to me. My biggest problem on the playground was that I felt bad if I couldn't play with everyone. I wanted to play with everyone. I was genuinely came home crying one day. And that was my problem. So that's my biggest thing. But it can be also difficult when kids are pulled out or made separate to actually achieve higher. It seems to be like sometimes that's too much pressure. It seems also like it disadvantages the rest of the students. And this is the least robust argument, in my opinion. It's a very sort of communist leaning perspective that the rest of the kids in the classroom, because they're underachieving or not achieving at higher than average levels, if you keep those gifted kids in the classroom, they will sort of provide the example of what could be achieved and increase the possible understanding of the other kids by being technically of a similar like age and abilities otherwise, but having this sort of like higher view or skill and ability level. So, and that is shown to be true. It is shown that when you have gifted kids in the classroom, the other kids do better. So it's not a bad argument, except you might ask, is it fair to keep the gifted kids in the classroom just because the other kids do better when they're around? If it would improve anything about their outcomes or their choices or their self-worth or any of these things, wouldn't it be better to pull them out? I just wonder if that metric should even really be included in the question. But anyway, there is a lot going on about whether or not you should even do gifted education, how you should do it if you do it. And so I just wanted to also bring up the criticisms of focusing on gifted kids, especially in a way that makes them feel different. I would say ideally we're addressing the sort of like hatred spewed at the intelligent rather than not letting it be known that they're very intelligent, right? Because that's kind of almost what the question comes down to too. It's like, well, why do kids make fun of each other for being smart? Like, why have we created that culture? It's not just a default. It's not like humans just do that. Why is that our culture? And there's other cultures where that isn't true. In fact, it's the opposite in a lot of cultures where kids who aren't performing very well get made fun of instead of the smart kids. So, what is that, and how can we change that? Might be a better question than shouldn't, should we pull the gifted kids out or not? I also want to point this out. Gregory in the chat says, I was always put in the half tard class because I would constantly question authority and I also couldn't read too good. Yeah, this is actually really common. It's more common with poor kids and it's most common with Black kids. So there's some inherent racism perhaps going on there and some inherent classism perhaps going on there. But also what I think is going on more so is there's inherent misunderstanding of what's appropriate behavior from kids. Like kids should question literally everything and you should celebrate it. And there's ways to do that while maintaining technical authority, but allowing the freedom of exploration of those questions. I did that the entire time I was a teacher. I was like, "Oh, yeah, question this authority, question that rule. Let's have a conversation about why that rule even exists or why we would even want to act in this way together or what our goals are here together. Like, let's talk about it because these are fantastic learning opportunities." But instead, what a lot of very insecure and quite unintelligent adults will do is label that kid bad or defiant or stupid or incapable and push them off as someone else's problem, or put them in those types of programs that are for kids who don't seem to have as high of skill levels. I'll say also it's all pretty ridiculous that we expect everyone to have the same skills with things like reading and math at any age ever. It actually has nothing to do with age at all. And that is absolutely proven beyond a shadow of a doubt by all of history and every single piece of data we've ever gathered. But we still do it. We still break kids in half psychologically and beat them to death with themselves if they're not doing what we just arbitrarily said they should do at a certain age. It's insanity. It's reason 10 billion to never ever put your kids in government indoctrination centers. But anyways, I don't think I meant to keep this page open, so we'll close it. I also don't think I meant to keep this one open. I don't know. I guess just to maybe remind me that there are questions of the CIA being involved in this. I'm going to say too, like, I don't doubt for a second that there are sections of the CIA or sectors of other government programs that have been long since searching for people of very specific criteria. And why wouldn't a government indoctrination center, aka schools, be a place where they would gather data? So whether or not it's in a gifted and talented program, whether or not they were in the gifted and talented program, you would still be able to gather data, especially the more we've gone towards standardized testing, right? And easily reportable data like that, easily siftable data like that. It's easier and easier. So I just don't doubt it, even though I personally can't find a paper trail proving it. It seems obvious to me that you would use things like that. So anyways, a lot of people in the comments of these videos will talk about being pulled out, being brought into weird rooms, lots of weird testing, the same type of stuff that I remember. But also a lot of them point out some other curious aspects of their memories. And so we're going to get into some of that in a bit too. But yeah, the gifted and talented education is what GATE stands for, as we've talked about. There are government funding programs to support gifted programming. And a lot of this has been cut more and more over time. So like this one we're looking at here from this school district is from 2012. And actually it was about 2008 and that last economic crash that schools had to then start to choose between like music programs and gifted programs and PE and more math, more reading, more of the same. And of course they didn't, but that was the rhetoric, and the rhetoric determined the policy. right? And unfortunately, again, 100% of our data from 100% of history, never been any data that has anything but these results, shows that our gifted programs, our music programs, our PE, our physical education, our recess, literally just playtime and recess, all of those things improve test scores. 100% of them, 100% of the time. So cutting them to pretend like you're going to focus on math or reading or these other things is absolute bullshit. It's a complete and utter lie. It's based on rhetoric. It has to do with austerity, and that's it. And it's not based on actually good education. It's actually cheaper for us to have music and recess and the other things. And all it is that stupid people can't understand words. And they just don't understand. Like, what I just said doesn't seem to make sense to them, so they just don't accept it. And that's all there is to it. And there's more stupid people, unfortunately, than there are people who actually understand things like the simple statement I just said. So I can talk for 75 hours straight about the ills of education and educational policy, where we've gone wrong, what would be better, what we know from research, what actually works, everything. But almost no one understands it, and they don't care. So it's like, it just doesn't matter. So I don't talk about it a lot. So that's also what's going on with all of this. And so there's also people who point out that why gifted programs kind of exist similarly to special education programs, and that the teachers sometimes just want to get these kids out of the classroom. Like, gifted kids are challenging kids, and special needs kids are challenging kids. So again, most teachers aren't fantastic people, and they're not super intelligent, and they actually don't know how to teach very well. And so the more problems they have in their classroom is how they see it, and the harder it is to do their job, which is already a hard job, and they're already not equipped to do it. So they want to get them out of the classroom. And a lot of gifted programs come down to this, where they don't actually end up nurturing the child. They don't actually end up giving them any sort of support of their special gifts or their high level learning. And instead, they just remove them from their friends and give a stupid teacher a stupid break, I guess. And that's unfortunate, right? It has more to do with behavior and poor teaching than anything else. And that's not a good reason to have a gifted program, right? It should be based on what we know works and whether or not it is actually good for the kid, based on research and evidence, and like nothing else. That should be the only thing, right? What's best for our kids or nothing. So let's see what the CIA has to say about the gifted education program on Wikipedia. Mostly the same things that we've already said. A lot of the things we saw in that first handout that was back on archive.org, that was from the school district talking about their GATE program. Homeschooling is interestingly pulled out as a gifted option, which is very true, especially if you do any kind of like unschooling, hack schooling, or project-based. What was the program that I did with my students that was so amazing? Genius Hour. If you do like a Genius Hour style of programming, which is really just project-based learning that's self-directed. It's wonderful. It's open-ended. It's perfect. It's perfect for all kids, whether they're gifted or not. But if you do any of that sort of stuff when you're homeschooling, it's even better. If you follow the curriculum that the school district gives you, like, you're just might as well be at school. So it's like it's not horrible, but it's not like great either. It's not gonna be as likely to encourage gifted types of thinking and problem solving, but it's better than, I guess, maybe it is better than leaving them in the cesspool that is public schooling. It's you could do better with less effort and cheaper, though, I'll say. So yeah, this just seems to be describing all of the types of education for these kids. It talks about how their assessments are based on kind of grade level identifiers, if they're higher than their grade level, and different skills, which we talked about, if they have a high IQ, which we talked about, if they're in some of the top percentiles of those tests, that might be an indicator. They, of course, always have to criticize IQ, because there's the whole communist leftist attack on the IQ that says that it's not actually based in reality, which is ridiculous. It's norm referenced. It's absolutely based in reality. I mean, it's just another way to try to say that we're all the same, and we're not. So, you know, in my opinion, IQ is valid. And yeah, they're talking about some of these tests. I kind of remember what is this? The WISC-4, Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children. I feel like I took that. SB5 sounds familiar too. Stanford Binet. Oh, I've administered this test to kids. That's interesting. Yeah, and I probably took it. And another Wechsler test. So there's a lot of these very specific tests that are not they're not your normal standardized tests. So there are special tests you could administer. Interestingly, some of the only kids that get given IQ tests are special ed kids. Isn't that interesting? It's because they have to prove that their IQ score is in some way not seemingly disconnected from their ability level. So if you have, for example, a high IQ, but you can't seem to read or write at grade level or do math at grade level, then you're special ed. If you have a really low IQ level and you do really poorly at those things, and you don't qualify for special ed. Isn't that interesting? Because they just say, well, no, it's just that you're dumb. You're not special. You don't have special needs. You're just not capable. And I'm like, I mean, that's kind of fair, but it's kind of fucked up. Like, it's true, right? But it's also like, ouch, sheesh, kitty got claws. Like, why? Education is not a soft, ooey gooey, empathic sort of thing going on here in this world, guys. So yeah, I used to know a lot more about Alfred Binet. I guess in my grad program, I probably got into him at some point, but I don't remember most things now about stuff that didn't matter, actually. So it's a fallen out of my brain. So they talk about 1918, the idea that we could start to identify kids and give them extra support. This is interesting. So they're just talking about how it became an idea that we could just identify kids. Then it talks about longitudinal studies of 643 children in California who scored IQ 140 or above. And then they looked at the genetic studies of genius. That's really interesting. We might look into that for a moment. This comes up later in some of our dream walking results. Continuing to evaluate them throughout their lives. They were called termites for some reason, these kids who had scored so highly in this specific longitudinal study done after 1940. Oh, no, sorry, after World War I, so 1930s, let's say. And the studies contacted the children in 1921. Okay, so 20s, in 1930 and 47 and 59. They've been the most extensive on high-functioning children, are still quoted in psychological literature. He claimed to have disproven common misconceptions, such as that highly intelligent children were prone to ill physical and mental health, that their intelligence burned out early, or that they either achieved greatly or underachieved. So he disproved all those things in that study. That's interesting. So there was another, Letta Hollingworth identified that it was important to identify kids early and support their gifts early to help them continue to achieve high levels. An unforeseen result of the launch of Sputnik in the Cold War was the immediate emphasis on education for bright students in the United States. It settled the question of whether the federal government should get involved in public education at all. Oh, I didn't know that. That's why we have the Federal Department of Education, which is a worthless office and should be abolished by all means. But here, I mean, they're literally telling you here that their whole point of doing this was to identify intelligent children who are gifted. You could guess why. To get them to work on things like the space race or other secret programs or other highly intelligence required, right, to do these things. So $1 billion was spent in 1958 to bolster science, math, and technology. It's just sad, though, because maybe it was working back then, but now it's just a giant waste, and it's horrifyingly sad to watch. I mean, because it's kind of like Idiocracy. It's just, if the adults are getting dumber, and we have shown that that is true. We dropped 20 IQ points recently. It's a terrifying specter before us. So if the adults are getting stupider, like, what hope do the gifted kids have? Money's not going to change this, guys. No. In fact, we need like a complete rehauling of our understanding of what education is even for and how to do it. But this also got us things like the advanced placement programs, which again, if you know, it's almost never about being gifted. If you know anything about AP programs in high schools, they really literally are just 10 times more work, and you might get a college credit out of it, and that's it. It's a bit accelerated, I guess. It's horribly stressful. I don't see why that would be helpful at all for any student. It does not increase their gifts. It does not teach them more. It just gives them a shitload more responsibility and work. Work. Work doesn't make people smarter, guys. So all of this gifted stuff really got us into some dangerous territory here with the Federal Department of Education existing at all, and also the scouring by the government of high-performing children, specifically to maybe lead them into or recruit them into specific programs. So anyway, then we get to No Child Left Behind, and basically just the degradation of education in general as we go on and on and on. So I think we're good. We're good here with our spook article on Wikipedia. Thanks for the information. Okay, so this genetic study of genius, I just opened that to see a little bit more about it. I might just come back to that later. That's kind of fascinating in its own right. We might do just a whole episode on IQ and genetics and other things like that, because it's fascinating. So this is one CIA, FOIA, Freedom of Information Act release that just shows that Stanford Research Institute is looking into the research and development of paranormal perception. And this is in 73, I want to say. Yeah, 73. Their objectives were fourfold. 50% of the effort would be directed towards the investigation of opportunities for the operational use of gifted individuals. So in 73, Stanford Research Institute, there's so many sketchy things going on with the Stanford Research Institute. So many sketchy psychological research and more. Stanford Research Institute. This is specifically paranormal phenomena connected with gifted individuals. The gifted is in quotes too, right? Usually the general way of using this term is to describe people of higher than normal intelligence. People on the far end of the bell curve in terms of IQ. It says 20% will be directed to establishing characteristics which will enable them to identify gifted subjects, meaning everything, right? Characteristics in general. Is there a hair color, eye color, age, height, genetic line, blood type, anything, right? They're just characteristics, open-ended. Gifted subjects. 20% will be directed towards investigation of the neurophysiological correlates of paranormal activities. So, trying to figure out what's going on in your brain and your body when paranormal things seem to be happening around you as a gifted person. And 10% will be directed towards the validation of these paranormal experiments. I will say, if you know me, you know almost nothing but paranormal phenomenon happening around me, especially in my teenage, adolescent years. Younger than that, I can actually see it, but it wasn't as perhaps obvious. I know that I would say things that would freak adults out all the time. I know that I would do things that would make people think I was psychic all the time. I know that I was communicating with other entities. I just didn't think any of that was weird or something to be noted. So it doesn't, and it wasn't as bluntly obvious as it got in my adolescent years. So interesting that I was both in that gifted program and also was surrounded by paranormal phenomenon. So they just talk then how this paranormal phenomenon exists, and this project will do well to figure out what's going on and to identify the people that they need. And that's kind of the document. This is one of the only CI documents I could find that even mentioned gifted. It doesn't mention the GATE program or anything like this. It doesn't mention education as a base of where they're doing their research or their combing through of the kids or nothing. It just says gifted, right? Gifted subjects. So who knows what they mean by that exactly, but it is an interesting little connection. And it's at Stanford, creepy Stanford, their research institute. Creepy Stanford and their research institute. So interesting stuff there. Keeping that open because I don't know if I saved a copy yet. So we'll look into that in a moment. Or sorry, I'm just keeping it open. So this was also really interesting. This is just a Reddit post. Am I offline? Why is it saying this? Oh, I think that's just weird. I seem to still be online. So yeah. So this is just Reddit, it's social media, right? It's just some random person who knows who. And they're just saying that the gifted and talented education is perhaps connected to the CIA or is a CIA project in and of itself. Again, not a lot of evidence to support that. That's okay, though. It's an interesting thread because I've heard other people document these sorts of characteristics that I want to read for you here that they have gathered. So they start out, they say GATE equals gifted and talented education. It's a part of the American education system. Yeah, technically that's true, right? I guess the Federal Department of Education was literally created for it, so it is. Basically, all kids are put through a screening test around grade 3 to 4, and some are selected by the results of the test to go into separate classrooms, sometimes separate schools, for a day or so each week. So that is what I remember. It was maybe grade 3. We were in a different room. I don't remember if it was a whole day or not. I don't remember if it was a part of each day. It was still within my school. I know we just were pulled out, walked there and did it, whatever it was. So this is what they say. They say a few similarities about us. So clearly this poster is a gifted and talented education student. A few similarities about us have become apparent as the threads naturally evolve. So, like I said, this is a 2-year-old thread. I think this topic was hot about 2 years ago. I'm not really sure. I think that's when it was going around a lot that people were talking about this. So this is from that time. So they probably gathered this from a lot of that was going on, a lot of different podcasts, a lot of different posts, a lot of people talking about this. So here's their list. It says blue eyes, and then they say hazel seems equally common. I will just say I have what people will call either blue or hazel eyes. Hazel to me seems to mean that there's some brown or gold in otherwise blue or green eyes, but it seems like everyone defines hazel differently, so whatever. Blue or light eyes, I'll say. They said occipital bun, also known as math bump on the back of the skull or Neanderthal trait. So that's interesting, right? It's a very specific lineage, if that's true. That is this sort of longer, elongated sort of skull. I have that too. I have that too. Okay. Birth complications like weeks early or not breathing. I don't think I had that. I haven't heard that story. I seem to have come out quite easily and well, and everything was fine. So I'm not checking that box. Near-death experience, particularly through drowning. I did. Fuck, that's crazy. Okay. I was going to say I didn't nearly drown, but I fucking did. That is insane. Why would that be true? What would that have to do with anything? Except that you're able to make really high-level contact at that time. I'm writing this down because I forgot that I almost drowned, and I don't want to forget that. I'm gonna do a dream program on this tonight, actually, and get more information about drowning. Here's what happened. The story as I was told it, I was still in diapers. I was barely walking, and we were all walking down a dock together, all being my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister. My brother's 5 years older. My sister's a year or two older. Obviously, the adults are adults. And I'm in my diaper waddling down the walkway, and apparently I just silently splashed into the water and nobody noticed. Nobody noticed, and nobody noticed for so long that actually some guy had also then been walking down the dock, didn't like hear a splash and run to see what happened, didn't like see a kid fall in and run to see, just looked down, saw a diaper in the water, and saw a child then attached to the diaper and reached down and picked me up by my diaper, which was all that I was wearing, and put me back on the dock. How long was I in the water? I don't know. Were they all high? Like, what was going on? I want to say if I had a child, I would definitely know if it fell in the water when it was a toddler on a dock. But let's just forgive my parents for a second. And yeah, I mean, is that near death? Is that drowning? I don't know. But that's interesting. That just came up. And maybe it was. I have had other experiences much, much, much later in life as an adolescent that are near-death experiences. As you've probably heard if you've been following me at all for a while. But that's, I think they're indicating that this is a bit earlier in life than that. So that's pretty interesting there. Okay, let's move on. Lack of memory of gait. See what? I did not look at this list before I'm reading it to you right now. Why would we have less memory of this? I know now. Yeah, I'm going to probe it more. I got some of my memory back via dream walking, but I'm going to go harder. I'm going to go a little deeper. Now I'm fascinating myself, so I have to get more curious about this. We did many hours there, it says, and it's all very vague. It's true. And there's other things, like I said, that aren't. In fact, there's other aspects of my gifted education, like sitting in the corner. I remember a lot of it. I remember logic boxes. I remember doing math out of books that were from the middle school. I remember being given, what was that stupid Reader's Digest? And because they had some kind of a word list in it that was just like, it was for adults, but it was like words that you might not already be using and know. And so I would go through and I was supposed to just pick my own words off that list that I didn't know yet and then look them up and then use them in sentences and stories. And that was like a big chunk of my day when everyone else was doing whatever they were doing. I remember all of that in detail, but I don't remember what we were doing in this classroom. Why is that? All right. Windows were covered. I had the impression that it was a dark, weird space, but I don't specifically remember this clearly enough to say that that's true. It's very possible that's true. It feels right to me. Tendency to be followed. It says abductions and general tracking. I don't have that feeling, but I don't know. I can't think of anything that fits that, like being followed or tracked outside of school. I don't have that in my mind. Law enforcement is extremely lenient and easy during chance encounters. I don't know. I was arrested at 18 for marijuana possession, so I guess maybe not. Who knows? High IQ, yeah. Highly intuitive and sensitive, absolutely. And then they list some more similarities that are less common, but a few gate people agree on too. It says interest in paranormal phenomenon, yeah. Heavy early 20s drug experimentation, yeah. But a lot of these are just sort of normal for highly intelligent people in general. So I don't know that this has anything to do with the program. Forehead scars, what? Why is that true? I do have one. What is that? I have a massive like scar up here. I can still feel it. It is like literally a dent in my skull. But I mean, I know what it was from. It's not like it was some weird paranormal thing. I remember making it. I remember falling into the corner of a post with my full body weight. Like I was a free fall and my head hit the corner of it. And it was a nasty head wound. So, I mean, it wasn't like someone like gave me a forehead scar in some like alien abduction scenario. It was just, that is kind of weird. Early speech therapy, no. Firstborn sons, no. Migraines, yeah. Israeli art student girlfriend, not even joking. What? That's weird. I clearly didn't have an Israeli art student girlfriend. I've had a few girlfriends in my I swear to God I'm a lesbian phase, but not Israeli art students. Premonitions and prophetic dreams all the time. Above average intuition, yes. And yeah, so that's the list. I love that they made this list. It's a great list. It's very interesting. And then there's tons of really interesting comments of people who were in the GATE program, who don't remember it, who remember the windows being covered and all of this. All of this stuff. It's really interesting. So, this is where we get our best research done, perhaps. It's like out of all of the masses of people who are hanging out on Reddit, and this is, more pre-bot overtaking everything, more pre-censorship going this deep. So it's like a little bit reliable, just at least because of the mass effect of it. That there's so many people who are participating in this. It'd be much harder to pull that off and make it seem reasonable that all these are actually different people commenting about these different things. So it's interesting. It's an interesting body of data here on Reddit. So fascinating. So yeah, it's worth checking out. This is just in the conspiracy Reddit, and it's called Gifted and Talented Education CIA Project is the post. I'm going to leave it up just in case we want to go back to that list for any reason. So this is just another Reddit post, and they said also something that's not on that list that I wanted to point out is many of the GATE kids had parents who were in the military. And I did too. My father was, not happily. And he's the reason why I started my life not trusting the media and the government. And it wasn't like inculcated into me or indoctrinated into me. It was just said so often that I was like, well, why? I mean, like, maybe I should question this. Like, I was always my parents were very good at letting us come to our own conclusions about literally everything and supporting our questions of literally everything. So it's part of why my whole family is intelligent, is because of that type of an upbringing, which I highly support for all kids. But yeah, it turns out a lot of them had parents in the military, and I did too. A lot of them seem to have parents, though not necessarily military, but clandestine private intelligence, Skunk Works, Phantom Works, etc., Northrop Grumman and Bigelow and all the like. So also interesting, like the paramilitary, can we call it that? Pseudo-military, crypto-military might be the best label for that group of types of organizations. But this is another one of those things where I'm like, well, doesn't just like a lot of people have parents in the military or crypto military, right? Like, couldn't you take a group of like special ed kids perhaps and maybe find the same? I just don't know. And maybe I'm tripping. Maybe it's not true at all. Maybe it is actually really weird that we all had military parents, but I'm not sure. I do understand the connection between military parents, crypto military parents, and abduction phenomena, which is also quite interesting, especially when you go down the rabbit hole of a lot of that abduction phenomena being actually the military itself, and the alien part being the cover memory placed over. If they can get us all to forget the GATE program experience in general and have very vague memories of it, they can probably get you to think that aliens abducted you instead of military people abducting you, right? Like, it's a very common, I'll say theory at this point, the MILABs, the military abductions. And in my experience, the only things that people call aliens that I've interacted with aren't flesh and blood and wouldn't abduct you, couldn't abduct you, could come talk to you, but couldn't take you anywhere except out of body and by your own will. So, the physical nuts and bolts, like here's a ship and here's a body of an alien being and now I'm being abducted, I just really have never seen evidence of it. And I have seen evidence that seems to point towards military. So that's fascinating to me too. And it's an easy way to take people and experiment on them, right? I mean, maybe not easy, but easier than any other way. If you think an alien abducted you, you're never going to go looking for the military that actually did, right? Interesting stuff. So there's a military connection, possibly crypto military otherwise. So this is just another poster on Reddit. It says, I believe I was part of an illegal government experiment while in elementary school. And this is somebody saying in third grade, I was part of a thing I can't remember the name of, where twice a week, me and a few other kids, and it says it wasn't ever average kids. It was always either kids at the top of the class or borderline special ed. And let's remember, a lot of times the special ed kids are there just because of their behavior. It's not actually because they don't have skills. And so those kids can actually be gifted and just not ever identified as such because they're not producing because of their behavior. If you don't produce a test result or an artifact that someone can look at and evaluate, then they might just identify you as special ed instead of gifted. It happens all the time, right? Here's an example too. Just because a kid didn't learn to read and therefore can't read at a really high level yet, doesn't mean they're not a genius. Your IQ can be ridiculously high and you can't read. So just keep that in mind when he's talking about this. Either kids at the very top or borderline special ed kids. They would go into a classroom while all the other kids went to PE or library or music, and we would do these really weird tests. The teacher, who I never remember seeing at the school before, would have us wear headphones, and the voice would say a series of numbers, and we would have to remember all the even numbers or numbers with more than 5 letters, or draw the shapes it would say, and other weird stuff like that. Wow. That's making me also feel like a memory is suppressed and wanting to come up. And audio makes it so easy to hypnotize people. That's crazy. Okay. He says we also had to do a lot of balancing exercises, like walking along balance beams or standing on one foot. And we also had to drink this really weird tasting pink Gatorade stuff. I need to look into all of this. Gatorade stuff, audio, exercises. Let's see what the dream walking results say. Okay, I could be wrong, but what else could this be? We were also never told to talk about it. We were told never to talk about it. It was an extremely small town, only about 3,000 residents. The school only had about 150 students. So that's very similar to my size of mine. There's also an added edit here. It says my parents did not recall signing a waiver for this. And during some of the tests, they would turn off the lights. Yeah, I don't think my mom would remember whether or not she signed a waiver, but I really don't think she did. I think they just did it. So people are like, well, it could just be a study and your school enrolled in it and you were just doing it. But other people are like, oh, this is probably the GATE program. You should look into all the things going on about this. So there's just some more interesting descriptions of what might have been going on in some of these programs back then. So I'll put this is from Twitter then, just a random person posting. They said, so all of us that were in the gifted and talented education program got ADHD, and it was a CIA program. And I'm like, I was diagnosed with ADHD, but to be fair, I was also diagnosed with ADD at some point. I was diagnosed with depression. I was diagnosed with anxiety. I was diagnosed with depression-related anxiety. I am not joking. And also anxiety-related depression. What even is all that? Why are there 4 different diagnoses there just for depression and anxiety? I've been diagnosed with a lot of things. And the reason why is not because I actually had any of those things. What I actually had was PTSD, CPTSD to be clear. And PTSD it envelops all of the symptoms for all the things I just listed. So I wonder how many people are misdiagnosed because their trauma isn't acknowledged, their PTSD isn't acknowledged, or possibly they don't have full-blown PTSD, but are leading up towards it. Who knows? But interesting thing to note. And then people are like, it's just special education for neurodivergence, wasn't it? To keep us away from the normies. And I just, if you know me, you know this term neurodivergent just drives me insane. It just means my brain works differently from yours. Well, yeah, 100% of people's brains works differently from 100% of other people's brains. 100% of people are neurodivergent. It is a pointless word. There is no point for it. It's not a thing. It just may as well say, I'm different from other people, and so is everyone else. Okay. But yeah, interesting stuff. We all have maybe some mental illness or what is diagnosed as such in this modern age. Interesting. Interesting. I'll say this too. If you don't have mental illness, being in this society and culture, maybe there's something wrong with you. Right? What do they say? It's insanity to be well adjusted to an insane culture. So maybe we're the sane ones, actually. So that was just an interesting side note. But this was also interesting. So this is gifted children as hidden persuaders in the Cold War. Jennifer Crane is the author here. Jennifer Crane explores how gifted children were imagined as potential peacetime leaders in the Cold War, or as dangerous future citizens who might use their unique talents to subvert authority. When you look at this program and this sort of focus on gifted children and their possible benefits or detractions from a civil society or a dominant culture or authority, especially, and what authority wants. So fascinating. Then you start to see, like, yeah, we don't necessarily need a CIA document, although we have one at least, to show us that the government was interested in gifted children, because we have these types of programs where they were. So psychologists had a fascination with the child mind in the decades after World War II, she writes. The child mind was presented as dynamic, complex, malleable. That might be the key word here. Like it's able to be shaped, and potentially dangerous. Psychological interest and intervention centered around children categorized as delinquent, criminal, subnormal, maladjusted, and gifted. So all of these were included. It kind of reminds me of that person who was saying, oh, gifted kids were in this program, but also the nearly special ed kids, right? Or the SPED kids were also there. So like, and as we know, again, the behavior, that sort of criminal or delinquent, or that is often just categorized as special ed, when honestly, often it's the geniuses. They're like, I can't live in this prison. So they act out. No joke. I mean, sometimes it is just trauma too, but like a lot of times it's because they're really, really intelligent. And then this is why almost all of my favorite students had horrible behavior. They were the hardest kids. They were the worst kids. But I love them because I was always like, you're a fucking genius. I love geniuses. My favorite people are geniuses. All right. So these children identified as gifted, which is a flexible and contested term. It's true. It's fair to say. They were seen as future national and international leaders of science, industry, and politics in Britain and the wider world. Meaning the Western governments. Just shortcut here. At the same time, popular culture also expressed concerns about the ways in which these children may use their unique talents to resist, challenge, and subvert the expertise and authority. And that's the real problem, isn't it? If you can't find and locate these gifted children and coax them into supporting authority or going along with, or right, then you have to worry about what they're going to do. And maybe you will track them to see. And maybe that's why my phone was tapped as early as 19 years old, because I was organizing on the social level, protests and more, and had already been tagged perhaps in one of these programs. I also got on the radar by stupidly taking the ASVAB so that I could get out of stupid, boring classes that weren't challenging enough for me and scoring at the very highest score levels, and therefore the military would not let me alone after that. They called me all the time, and not gonna lie, I had a lot of fun with it at first because I would just debate them, and they weren't as smart as me. They were like 20, 30-year-olds who like couldn't top me in a debate. I was like, you're gonna have to do better than this if you want me to join your stupid death cult. It's not gonna happen. So I was, kind of my own fault. Kind of liked it because it was fun to debate them. But anyway, it said, also given the tools to think as though we couldn't think already, gifted children could become powerful hidden persuaders of culture. This is another thing that has been studied and looked at, and there are just people, they're almost never the ones that everyone is going to necessarily like talk about and point at, but they are the ones that are sort of starting a lot of the trends of thought, especially in their cohort. And the desire to locate these kids became like a corporate goal, right? Like the corporations wanted to find them because then they could get them to wear their clothes or listen to the music or do the thing, and then everybody would also do the same. So that's a whole different thing, but it's related to this interest in the gifted child or the hidden persuaders, right? The ones who seem to have all of these sort of characteristics. And I love it too, because I'm gonna say, I don't think they ever figured out why. I think they have this all nailed down and they still don't get what's going on because they don't really understand spirit. They don't understand soul. They don't understand consciousness. And that's their missing piece. And that's why they'll always fail to actually control us. So anyway, this is just a really well-written article about these sort of gifted children and the way that they were looked at and how all of these, we'll just say power organizations, governments, and the like looked at possibly using them or suppressing them because they were dangerous. So it's interesting. It's interesting. There's a lot of different sort of, writing and studies and just philosophy around it. There's not a lot of like hard, again, like CIA documents or anything, but it's still worth reading. It's called Hidden Persuaders, Gifted Children as Hidden Persuaders in the Cold War by Jennifer Crane. So I'll also point out, this is from the CIA Reading Room, and it's actually just, what was this magazine called? Nexus? Nova? Why aren't they saying it here in the description? I don't want to scroll all the way back to find it. Anyways, it's like Nexus or Nova. It's whichever one of those was the magazine and not the documentary series. But anyways, it's the CIA was interested in this, and so has this in their reading room as well. But this article is actually about China's psychic savants. And so this is kind of China's equivalent, perhaps, program, like the GATE program, or like some of the GATE program that was actually perhaps a little bit more, at least like cloak and dagger, like subversive, less out in the open, if not fully nefarious. And this is their version. So it just talks about how they also would identify their gifted children, how they would encourage them to develop psychic skills. It says a group from the Beijing Teacher Training Institute announced that its young charges could cause an operating radio transmitter to disappear from one room and show up in another. So literally moving, psychokinesis, moving objects through other objects. Qigong masters were capable of extraordinary physical feats, including the ability to emerge unscathed when struck on the chest with the blade of a sword. And if you haven't yet seen the videos that are old videos before it would be easy to fake something like this, there's plenty of them. I have episodes where we've gone through them to look at some of them. And there's people just running at a motherfucker with a sword and just like not able to even cause a scratch. Just slicing them with this sword that they show can slice through like wood and watermelons and like all this stuff. Hit this guy, doesn't even dent him. There's videos of guys starting fires with their hands. And this is like been going on for thousands of years. It's only in the modern world where we have people stupid enough to deny the spiritual, so-called spiritual sciences, might be a better term, or consciousness, or just energy within our system and how we can use it. Only the modern world denies this. This has been established forever. So this write-up in this magazine is just talking about that kind of stuff and how China, probably because they still had so many people practicing those things, was like, let's use this for war. Let's get these kids early and let's see how they can help our military. And if they won't, you know what we'll probably do? I'm not saying this is an article. I'm saying this is just China and it's how they function. We'll find a way to force them or we'll kill them because they're too dangerous otherwise. Right? So interesting stuff. We also have this book here. This is from Preston Nichols, Montauk Revisited, Adventures in Synchronicity. And this also is, based around some things we can point to that did actually happen. We don't have a lot more about the Montauk projects than the people who were supposedly in it and talk about being in it. And they were all children, allegedly. But this is the first just sort of intro on the flap. I can't remember what it's called right now of the book, on the insert. I don't know. In 1943, invisibility experiments were conducted aboard the USS Eldridge that resulted in full-scale teleportations of the ship and crew. Popularly known as the Philadelphia experiment, these events resulted in paranormal experiences and mental disablement for the majority of the sailors involved. After World War II, a massive research project was undertaken to get to the bottom of the Philadelphia experiment and thereby discover the functional secrets of the unified field theory. The purely technological developments eventually resulted in today's stealth aircraft. Additionally, a human factor study was conducted. It was far more bizarre. While seeking to understand how human beings could survive in other dimensions, people were subjected to experiments whereby their minds were interfaced with radio waves and vacuum tube computers. Psychic abilities were monitored and eventually harnessed until time itself could be manipulated. The most extravagant of these experiments took place at the Montauk Air Force Station at Montauk Point, New York, and have been popularized in the first book of this series, The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time. And this digs deeper into the mysteries of the Montauk and offers countless stories and corroborations that show the project did actually exist. So that's why I say there's not a lot of what we might call hard evidence, but there are a lot of softer pieces of evidence that do make it seem like it did happen. It was very likely to have occurred. Exactly what was going on is anyone's question, especially when we know what might be able to be done with memory, cover memory, screen memories, and making memories very hard to reach and the like. For me, it's a fact that time can be manipulated. I've experienced it multiple times myself. What seems to be jumping timelines that I've experienced directly, and also what seems to be happening when I experience things like soul retrieval, both for myself and for the people I work with. That is a type of time travel. And so that's not in question for me. It might be for a lot of other people, and I'm not too concerned with that. That's up to them. But the fact that that exists, and therefore the government's likelihood to then investigate it, especially given how much documentation we have around their other investigations, very much documented around everything, every paranormal phenomenon you can imagine for so long now. Like, why wouldn't they have this type of an experiment going on, right? And the Philadelphia experiment itself is insane. So yeah, time and space being manipulatable is not in question for me. And it's an easy sort of very slight hop to understand that they probably used children in some of these experiments, and that those children would have been selected for what we would call their gifted abilities. So I just wanted to pull in that thread from Montauk. And so here's what my dream walking group got around the GATE program. And I'm sorry, I misspelled this as a GATES program, because like I said before today, I'd only heard people talk about it here and there randomly and never done much deep looking into it myself. And so it is the GATE program. So just excuse that misspelling there. And so this was our intent, was to find out the true nature and intention of the GATE program or similar educational programs for special children. The reason we said similar educational programs was so that we weren't only getting information on very normal, non-sneaky, non-anything like no subterfuge going on, just gifted programs that every school sort of has, right? We wanted to specifically get what people mean when they talk about the GATE program, or if it has another name we don't know, like that sort of educational program. So that's why we kind of phrased it that way. And here's some of what we seem to get based on our results. Again, it's somewhat like remote viewing. But it's via our dreams. And again, anyone can learn to do this. This is what I teach. One of the many things I teach, but I teach this more frequently as a full-on program for people. And my next program will be in likely October of 2024, if not sooner. So like I said, if you're specifically very interested in doing this class, before October of 2024, you can contact me and just kind of be on the list. If I get enough people, I'm happy to do an earlier one. So anyway, here's the results. It seemed to be a lot of bloodline aspects. So a blood type or bloodline seemed to be part of the selection criteria for those who were in this program based on what we got. That kind of connects back to some of the genetic aspects of this study, or I don't know. I didn't hear actually anyone really specifically say this in any of those lists we talked about, but I myself am Rh negative, and I have some pretty interesting lineage. As far as what I think is interesting, a lot of native, I have native Japanese, I have native North European known as the Sami, and I have some Native American. So I have these kind of older bloodlines from a lot of different continents in me, which is very interesting for me. And being Rh negative might be part of it, right? I would love to know. I would love to get in touch with those other kids. I know some of them still, and ask them their blood type or if they remember anything about this. But anyways, that was one of the things we got. We also got specific blood and specific advanced qualities like intelligence and compassion. So compassion might also be, you might call it empathy, right? Or you might call it intuition. So that was kind of hinted in some of the other lists we saw. So high intelligence, high what we might call empathy, and then the specific blood. We also got the possibility that they were trying to turn these children in some way or use them for what we would call dark purposes, hidden purposes. What is the actual dark? We never got super clear on what that is, but just the fact that it was hidden, or just being used without full knowledge, right? That's dark enough. So it might not be like super evil, right? I'm just pointing that out. Still not good. Still not cool. So interested in either stopping. This is something that they were either interested in stopping or creating the next, and this is in quotes for a reason, Jesus. What that would mean would be some highly advanced person who has mastery level of what we might now call paranormal skills. Or another way of looking at that is that it's just an advanced level of humanity, like that we're all sort of evolving perhaps in some ways, but some people might be jumping a little bit earlier than others. And so they're either trying to slow that down or they're trying to accelerate it. And that's just unclear because of how it came through in the dream, right? They're doing some manipulating with that specific skill set. Is it increasing it, reducing it? We weren't sure. There seemed to be a lot of frustration coming through that program. Like they were already frustrated about something, which is interesting to me. It's almost like that time travel aspect of it might be what's frustrating them. Like they think they can control time and outcome, but they can't. So they're trying to figure out what's stopping them, is my interpretation of that. Although that might be that's based on a lot of other stuff that's channeled through for me and other things I found. So that's just me kind of sharing that level of insight. Not necessarily the dream that came through. Trying to contain something uncontainable and possibly dangerous. And let's remember, this might be dangerous from their point of view. So it might be dangerous for authority. It might be dangerous for control. It might be dangerous for the centralization of power. Not necessarily actually dangerous for humanity, right? Not necessarily dangerous for the earth. So they're trying to contain something uncontainable. That makes, again, it's part of the frustration, it seems like, is that they can't seem to figure it out or can't seem to contain it. This part gives me the most hope, honestly. This sort of response and information that we got gives me the most hope about that they can't stop it. One also was that there was some sort of prompting to become less amorphously loving. So just generally loving of all things and more focused on helping or solving problems, right? This was sort of on the lines of like, what are they specifically trying to accomplish? And it was like getting this amorphous love cloud of energy to be more focused on like, how can we help and how can we solve problems? So that's not so dark. It's not so nefarious sounding. You know, put that beautiful, empathic, spiritual skill to some sort of direct use. Hopefully a good one. Being shown that there was more abundance than ever could have been imagined, and that there's no need to worry about material or material goods, material situations. This is a really interesting outcome there. And learning that there's deep evil, that it actually exists, and that we should focus on stopping the evil over all other things in life. That was a specific aspect that came through of the goals of the program. Stopping evil over all other things in life. Very interesting, right? That's why I'm like, the darkness doesn't have to be nefarious. And the fact that it's hard to remember doesn't have to be nefarious. There might be really good reasons to instill certain qualities or encourage or engender certain skills and abilities and outlooks that actually serve everyone. And I just like to point that out because it's possible. I'm not saying you have to go that way. You can think this is all dark and horrible. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying. All right, it's a possibility. So this was also coming through the dreams, that they were trying to expand the consciousness of the gate kids so that they could access information from other realms, other dimensions or realms. Expanding their consciousness so they can act. So this sounds sort of similar to the Montauk type of thing. A little bit of time travel-y sort of stuff going on here. A little bit of interdimensional things going on here. Is that part of why I seem to have that experience my whole life of interdimensional travel and accessing other realms, of time travel type things going on, paranormal type things going on? Maybe. Like I said, before then it was definitely happening, but after then it was a lot more direct and blunt. So, you know, this going back to that idea of being less amorphously loving and more focused on helping and solving problems might kind of connect with that. Also, sometimes wanting to use the info for not so great purposes. So here's that darkness again. But that also implies that the rest of the time there actually was a positive motivation behind this program. Right, so I keep going back to that for a reason. I just want to remind people that there can be a lot of good going on, and then it can also get sort of twisted for dark by other energies. So both can be happening. This was really interesting, possibly trying to avoid massive roadblocks for humanity in general, like pandemics. Isn't that interesting, given what we just saw? Isn't it interesting to wonder if the 144,000, so to speak, were encouraged to work with timelines and paranormal skills and interdimensional travels and these sorts of things in order to prevent things like that from actually working, and that it might have actually worked, and that we actually were supposed to have a much worse pandemic and we didn't because of timeline manipulation or paranormal skills? I mean, that's fascinating to me. And I've said it many times, so many times, I feel like a broken record, that it feels to me like we've avoided a lot of the worst possible outcomes already. Not all of them yet. We're not fully, like, maybe clearly, completely out of the woods, but that we should have perhaps been completely enslaved or destroyed or both a long time ago. And it hasn't happened. I like to keep going back to that point. It's a good one to remember. This was also interesting, too. It came through that part of it might have been about accepting our good and bad natures as a way to survive. If I had to elaborate on this from a spiritual perspective and from just my whole life, this is actually key Like you actually have to deal with your, what we might call bad karma, or we might call just trauma and wounding. You have to actually confront the darkest aspects of yourself and integrate them in order to truly access your highest self and your higher level skills and abilities. And so that's kind of a fascinating look at this as well, what might have been going on in these GATE programs. There was also this very interesting piece that came through, that we are being hunted. We're being hunted possibly by what? I don't know. But the way to survive is to see the bright side of life and live in accordance with your higher self. And again, this is coming through with the same message of accepting our good and bad natures. So like, you can't be hunted if you have healed yourself and integrated your shadow side, is the way I take this. And that is actually true on the spiritual level. Like demonic energies, negative entities, these sorts of things, they can't feed off of you. They can't hunt you. They can't contain you. They can't control you when you've integrated that. You have to be in a state of disconnection and avoidance and not sort of integrating all those aspects of yourself for them to latch onto you and feed off of you. That's why I do what I do. It's the only reason why I do what I do. It's been my life motivation all along. So there's a reason, and this is why. So it's amazing to me that this is coming up through our dream walking about the GATE program. And the final piece that came through is what we see as evil has a purpose also, right? What we experience as evil also has a purpose for us. And so we have to sort of get over it, accept it, and again, deal with our shadow side and integrate it in order to step past all of this into our highest timeline, perhaps. Again, I'm elaborating on what came through, but you can see what came through here. These are all the points that came through our dream walking group. And I just adding my own sort of extrapolation onto that. So I'm trying to make it clear where I'm doing that and where I'm not. And here's just some thoughts we had around the subject based on our conversations and what came through the dreams. And so I thought they were worth mentioning too. And one of these was a point I was making about that we've had sort of secret online recruitment and harnessing technologies going on for a while now. So this might be why we don't really see a focus on this in schools anymore, or we don't really see the in-person, pull kids out and put them in a dark room and do weird audio stuff with them. Like, because there's a lot of online stuff going on, and it can be much more like full of subterfuge now. Like your kids could just be playing games or surfing online and be being studied the whole time. And we see this also with really obvious ways with like the Cicada program and other sort of online recruitment puzzles. So much of that is happening that I doubt why would they even focus on schools anymore? They don't need it. We've got the best sort of like surveillance devices all around us all the time. So that's one thing we talked about, or that I brought up. Someone brought up that Stanford created these programs in the first place. And so there was a lot of occult things going on around that time that Stanford did so. And we kind of touched on that today, but I wanted to make sure that was there. This occult types of studies and paranormal types of studies were more acceptable 100 years ago, believe it or not. And so now we're in the cult of atheism for a very important reason, and that's because you're highly controllable when your religion is actually just the state. and so there's a reason for that. But back then, you could actually talk about these things in Stanford and study them with more acceptance. And so maybe that's connected, right? And finally, that perhaps there's regions that had more focus on these programs. It seems to be the case. And when you look at the regions that seem to have these programs, they do all happen to be on pretty powerful sort of ley line or powerful geographic locations. So that's an interesting piece too. Like they were perhaps very focused on very specific places, kids born in specific years, maybe even the astrology of those kids, blood types, and more that we would want to consider when we're looking at this. So those are the results we got from dream walking. And I also want to bring you here to end on another hopeful aspect, even though we've already hit on a bunch of them. And this comes from my Substack. This has come from a channeled message that came through. This was actually right at New Year's. This came through on December 31st, 2023. So it was a New Year's sort of message. And super interesting stuff. So sometimes I have like a question I'm asking, or sometimes I have sort of a problem I'm mulling over, or just something I'm dealing with. And that's like the subject of what comes through. And other times I just sort of sit and open the channel, so to speak, and then a message just comes through. So this is the message that comes through. And I'll just read parts of it, or I don't know, maybe I'll end up reading the whole thing. And so lucky you, if you're not subscribed at the paid level on rogueways.substack.com, then here's a free sort of channeled message for you. So again, this is the spiritual ancestors, as I call them. These are high-level spiritual beings that travel by Merkaba and are just at the soul level, and they're in pure form is another way to think of it. They're not physical beings. They are high levels of consciousness. And as far as I understand, I've been interacting with them my entire life, more and more and more clearly as time goes on, although my experiences with them have been profound and obvious since I was an adolescent. So it's just much more recently, in the past maybe 8 years, that I have understood that I have channeled them from time to time and how to do so intentionally. So that's sort of the background if you don't know. And here's their message on December 31st of 2023. They say, love is the true nature of all things. Truth exists objectively. There is a difference between what you call good and what you call bad. The difference matters. There is objective beauty. All that is good, true, and beautiful is what matters most at this moment in human evolution of consciousness. The battle is fought on these fronts. There are movements within your world that have existed for millennia whose intentions are to destroy and invert all that is good, true, and beautiful. These forces have worked to control culture, viewpoints, and indoctrination, as well as governments, military forces, and every institution and transaction of human community in order to accomplish their vision. The vision of these beings and groups seems on the surface to be about control. It is simple enough to hold this as your understanding of their agenda. The truth is, they are so twisted and separated from source in themselves that their narcissistic goal is to create a world that mirrors what is inside of them. Your goal is the same. All humans manifest what is inside of them. It is a fact of nature and an effect of the cause of your being. It is vital, then, that you understand the front lines of this dynamic so that you may more clearly align with the height of what you have chosen to manifest, in spite of what appears to be the dominant forces of manifestation on Earth. Remember that these twisted beings aim to destroy the good. They aim to destroy nature and replace it with synthetics. They aim to remove the family and replace it with institutions of control. They aim to shatter the harmony of masculine and feminine balances and replace it with androgyny. They aim to delete the objectively ethical and moral and replace it with ideals that do not exist in nature, such as equality and uniformity. Remember that those who have fallen aim to destroy the truth. They aim to destroy the concept that there is objective truth at all in order to replace it with a subjectivity that holds neither anchor nor blueprint. They aim to remove the methods by which humans have always discovered truth, such as relying on sensory input and intuitive guidance. They aim to undermine the ability for you to think and use logic, especially by overwhelming you with too much information, most of which serves no purpose in your mind. Remember that the disconnected aim to destroy the beautiful. They aim to destroy the understanding that beauty is not in the eye of the beholder, but that it exists or does not exist. They aim to erase the eternal aspects of beauty encoded into all of nature, such as symmetry, harmonic ratios, and pattern. They aim to remove your ability to recognize and praise beauty by shaming you for noticing a difference between that which is base and that which is exalted. The ease by which you create and retain connection to all that is good, true, and beautiful, then is simple. Never stop acknowledging that good exists objectively and distinctly separate from evil. Always speak and act in accordance with truth, which is an eternal essence of the universe, not debatable or subjectively dismissed. Stand in appreciation of and give value to the beautiful without pretending that the ugly lives near perfection. The narcissistic nature and the psychopathy of those who are twisting the pathway of human development will always return to these same methods because their illness is singular and it is separation from source. They are in disharmony and disconnection. Be in harmony and connection. Collect and celebrate all that is good, true, and beautiful. You will save all of yourself and, of course, all of the world. We collect and celebrate with you. And maybe you want to go back and listen to that one more time because it's pretty hearty. It's pretty dense. And it's so concise. It is actually the outline of exactly what evil is and exactly what's going wrong and exactly how it's going wrong and exactly what to do about it. And what's always fascinating to me is how many people reject how simple it is actually. How simple it is to just be in alignment with the good, true, and beautiful. And just in doing so, you're creating the world. As they said, it is true, you automatically manifest what's within you. Automatically. And the more clearly you know what's within you and what you're aligned with, the more clearly you manifest that. Simple. It's simple and it will be rejected by all of the people who are still in their atheism, still in their rejection of their own consciousness, still in rejection of spirit and soul, still in rejection of source, just because we're born in this dark, dark age. It's so easy to pretend like we know a lot and that we know how to fix it all and that it all can be reduced to the nuts and the bolts and to ignore all of that stuff. But you know who's not ignoring that stuff? Those guys, the evil, the twisted, the dark, the corrupted, they've got programs to find it out, to seek it, to control it before it can bud, perhaps, and more. So you gotta wonder if the people who seem to be in control of the dominant paradigm in most of the world are interested in it, fascinated by it, kind of obsessed with it. Don't you think it might be important? Those people tend to ignore that part of it. Maybe it's not to be ignored. But in the end, what really matters most is that you really do understand that about yourself and that you really know who you are and why you came here and that you keep standing in that and moving into deeper presence and alignment with that, the further you go in life. That's what really matters. And so until you nail that, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.
waltz on a nimbus with an S of a gymnast. Stretch lung fitness, Mobius strip witness. Swim upstream through the fibers of infinity in the vicinity of infallible divinity. Outstretched arms, but flesh ain't allowed to taste it. No, so close as the moon bases above the light of dawn. Howling at the luna, gnawing at the wire into my organic computer. On the draw, it's the raw fallen star shooter. Rip the fabric of time, string theory suture. Past becomes the future, subconscious in the forefront. Lost the programming, obnoxious to the Lord's grunts. Tiptoe on obelisk, soaking nature's novelist. To the soul it's obvious, the optical ain't dominant. Matter seeming prominent to Gaia's drowsy occupants. Check the emerald documents, the depth of this is bottomless. Depth of this is bottomless. Bottomless. Depth of this is bottomless.